Trump backed away from the Ukraine deadline amid the Whitcoff scandal. The American president retreated from the previously set deadline of Thursday, November 27th, for Ukraine to agree to the U.S. peace plan. "For me, the deadline is when everything is over," Trump emphasized aboard the presidential plane. He stated that many points of the plan have already been agreed upon, and Whitcoff's meeting with Putin in Moscow is scheduled for next week.
Right now, we have 22 points. Many of them have been resolved, and in fact resolved very successfully. We'll see what happens.
At the same time, Bloomberg published a transcript of a phone conversation between Trump's special representative Whitcoff and the Russian dictator's aide for international affairs, Yuri Ushakov, which took place on October 14th. During the conversation, Whitcoff suggested to Ushakov that they develop a new peace plan similar to the American peace plan for Gaza, and explained to him that it would be best if the idea for such a plan was proposed to Trump by Putin himself. Whitcoff also advised Ushakov to arrange a phone call between Putin and Trump before President Zelensky arrives in Washington. 2 days later, on October 16th, Putin did in fact call Trump. It was then that they discussed the possibility of a meeting in Budapest, which ultimately fell through. The American president replied that he had not heard the recording of the conversation referenced in the publication, but it did not surprise him, since this is the behavior of a professional negotiator.
You know, this is a completely standard form of negotiation. I would assume that he is saying the same thing to Ukraine. Judging by the current situation, Russia has the advantage in the war, and it would be more beneficial for Ukraine to reach an agreement right now.
NBC News wrote that the U.S. Secretary of the Army allegedly warned Ukraine of inevitable defeat. The article stated that the intensity of Russian strikes is increasing and that Russia could wage the war for a very long time. That's why it's necessary to seek a peaceful agreement now before the situation gets worse. Secretary of State Rubio, in turn, called the article fake.
This story is yet another example in a long series of completely fake news about disagreements within the Trump administration regarding how to end the war in Ukraine.
These people are not just mistaken, they are literally making things up, Rubio said. Steve Whitcoff advised Putin's aide on how best to talk to Trump about a peace agreement. It is reported that this became known from a recording of a phone call between Trump's special envoy and the dictator's aide, Yuri Ushakov, which is in the possession of Bloomberg. The conversation between Whitcoff and Ushakov allegedly took place on October 14th, 3 days before Donald Trump's meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky in Washington, and lasted just over 5 minutes. By that time, Trump was considering the possibility of supplying Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine, discussing new sanctions against Russia, and publicly expressing dissatisfaction with Putin. According to the transcript, Ushakov asked Whitcoff whether it would be helpful for Putin to call Trump before his meeting with Zelensky. Whitcoff replied in the affirmative. He also recommended that Putin congratulate Trump on the peaceful gas agreement and say that Russia supported it and that he respects the president as a man fighting for peace. According to the transcript, Ushakov took the advice into account. The agency also obtained an excerpt of a conversation between Putin's envoy Dmitriev and Ushakov's aide. This conversation took place after Whitcoff's phone call to Ushakov, and they discussed the very peace plan that needs to be handed over to Steve Whitcoff so that he can present it as his own. In a conversation with journalists, Trump stated that he had not heard the recording referenced in the publication. But he is not surprised by this, since this is the behavior of a professional negotiator. He also clarified that during the negotiations in Moscow, Whitcoff will be accompanied by the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner.
He needs to sell this to Ukraine. He needs to sell Ukraine to Russia.
Kirill Dmitriev left a comment saying fake under the post about the leak on the agency's profile on social network X. At the same time, Putin's advisor Ushakov essentially confirmed the leak involving Whitcoff.
I speak with Whitcoff quite often, but I won't comment on the content.
The advisor to the head of the office of the President of Ukraine, Mikhailo Podolyak, also commented on the scandal involving Steve Whitcoff. He stated that Kyiv does not believe that Trump's special envoy is playing on the Kremlin's side. He emphasized that it's just that some people in the Trump administration think they can make money together with Russia, while others, like Marco Rubio, contribute constructively and take a strategic view.
Europe is actively preparing for a possible Russian invasion. According to various forecasts, this could happen within the next few years. Germany's foreign minister, Johann Wadefull, believes that Russia is at least creating the capability to wage war against NATO no later than 2029. According to him, the threat coming from Moscow should not be underestimated, even if the war in Ukraine ends. During his speech at the opening of the Foreign Policy Conference in Berlin, the German politician stated,
"Even if the fighting stops now, there will still be an imperial and aggressive Russia whose ambitions extend far beyond Ukraine."
Waterfall noted that the aggressor country is already employing hybrid warfare tactics against European countries. These include drone flights, violations of airspace, sabotage, and campaigns to spread fake news. Adding fuel to the fire is the fact that the Kremlin consistently and regularly refers to Europeans as enemies in its official statements. In particular, just recently, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov accused Germany and France of allegedly regularly disrupting agreements related to Ukraine. Against the backdrop of these risks, Europe is ramping up its military strength. Specifically, European leaders are increasing their defense spending. Germany plans to spend the most on defense. Berlin will increase its defense budget by 25%. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Sweden, and Poland are also among the leaders. And just recently, the European Union prepared a military mobility package that will allow troops and equipment to be moved much more quickly if necessary. According to media reports, European countries will create a military Schengen. This project includes the creation of a pan-European military mobility area by 2027. In particular, the plan includes coordinating the use of trucks, railway platforms, ferries, and all transport routes capable of carrying tanks and artillery. As stated by the EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Kaja Kallas, the rapid movement of European troops is extremely important for European defense. I'll start with the attack on the Polish railway on Monday, which highlights the unprecedented risk to European transport infrastructure. Russia's attacks are becoming increasingly audacious. Our critical infrastructure needs greater protection. And although the risk of a full-scale conflict between Russia and Europe can currently be considered low, the European Union understands that it will take Moscow several years to amass enough troops to invade European countries. That is why supporting Ukraine is a top priority for Europeans. And the outcome of the conflict, as well as what the peace plan will look like, is of key importance for Europe.
Russians control most of Pokrovsk. This is reported by Ukrainian media, citing their own sources. According to their information, Pokrovsk is allegedly largely lost. There are still Ukrainian positions on the northern outskirts of the city. However, most of Pokrovsk is under the control of the occupiers. The monitoring project Deep State reports that Russians have entered the center of Pokrovsk and publishes footage from Russian social media showing the invaders in the area of the railway station. Russian occupation forces will not be able to capture Pokrovsk in the Donetsk region by the end of this year. However, they will not stop trying to occupy this city, said Chief of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine Andriy Hnatov, according to Unian citing Liga.net. The military official noted that the Russians will continue to create grounds for manipulation in the Pokrovsk direction. Currently, more than 100,000 occupiers are concentrated there.
These attempts have been ongoing for over a year, and the Russians keep postponing the deadlines they set for capturing the city. These deadlines will continue to be pushed back. Right now, they are pulling in all available reserves there. Will they manage to create conditions that make the situation even more difficult? It's hard to predict.
He added that since the very beginning of the large-scale invasion in 2022 and even before that, Ukraine has systematically countered the enemy's attempts. Despite pessimistic statements like all is lost, the armed forces of Ukraine are carrying out their tasks, inflicting significant losses on the enemy and slowing down their advance.
Far from everything is perfect, but we are making every possible effort to accomplish the tasks set by the Supreme Commander-in-Chief.
Let us recall the Russian army is putting pressure on Myrnohrad in the Donetsk region. The enemy is trying to cut off the land connection between this city and Pokrovsk.
The aggressor country Russia has exhausted its state financial reserves. The Russian Ministry of Finance has admitted that it will be impossible to balance the budget without raising taxes. This statement was made by Deputy Finance Minister Vladimir Klaichev. According to him, the Russian government made difficult decisions to raise taxes because all state financial reserves had been depleted. Thus, over the past 6 years, the expenditure side of the budget has increased from 16.6% to 19.7% of GDP, including due to defense spending, the share of which has reached a record 30% of the budget. At the same time, as Klaichev notes, revenues compared to the size of the economy have decreased by 1.3% of GDP.
These are mainly oil and gas revenues, while non-oil and gas revenues have remained more or less stable at the same level. And this gap has widened over these 6 years.
As noted in the Unian article, against the backdrop of the depletion of the federal budget, 56 Russian regions are reporting local budget deficits and increasing debt. This in turn will also affect the conduct of the war. For example, the Belgorod region may cut its national defense spending 12-fold, down to 70 million rubles, and regional contract payments for mercenaries will be reduced. At the same time, ordinary Russians are withdrawing funds from their accounts. Due to the blocking of mobile internet, terminals and ATMs often do not work, so Russian citizens are once again turning to using cash. As Ivan Us, a candidate of economic sciences, noted on the Freedom Channel, the crisis in the Russian economy can no longer be hidden.
Let me remind you that starting January 1st, the value-added tax in Russia will increase from 20 to 22%. The transport tax and environmental levy will also increase significantly, and right now they are developing some completely new types of fees. In other words, I joke that soon they'll be charging for air because they really do need the money to cover the budget deficit.
Sanctions are also putting significant pressure on the Russian economy. As NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte stated, it is precisely because of sanctions from the United States that the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin has begun to consider such an unpopular measure as raising taxes.
I was an elected official for several years, and I know that the very last thing you want to do is raise taxes, because it's extremely unpopular with voters. So, if Putin is now at the point where he has to raise taxes, that says a lot about the situation in Russia. The war against Ukraine is truly affecting the lives of Russians.
According to him, sanctions against Rosneft and Lukoil have a significant impact as they affect not only the Russian economy, but also countries that import Russian oil, such as China and India. Rutte is convinced that economic pressure could become one of the key factors in changing the attitudes of Russian society and elites regarding the continuation of Russia's war against Ukraine.